What happens when teenagers take their love of horror movies too far? For Sidney Prescott and her friends at Woodsboro High School, it means a meta-slasher bloodbath that would define a new generation of horror and breathe fresh life into the entire genre. I'm talking, of course, about the iconic slasher franchise, Stab. This is Nerdist Now. Oh, sorry, one second. Hello?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Oh, I guess I'd probably say Friday the 13th is, most personal to me, but if I had to go with my favorite, I'd probably say Scream or The Exorcist or... Why does that always happen? Anyways, this is Nerdist Now. Though not as expansive and long-running as its 80s predecessors, the Scream franchise has left a massive footprint and has arguably been even more impactful to the genre. Born in a time in the mid-90s when slashers and horror in general were in a decline at the box office, Scream infused the genre with energy, wit, and a meta-awareness that both paid tribute to and deconstructed what came before it. Written by Kevin Williamson, who would go on to make a name for himself in teen horror with other classics like I Know What You Did Last Summer and the criminally underrated film The Faculty, Scream, or Scary Movie as it was originally titled, was an outlet for his love of the slasher genre. Directed by horror master Wes Craven, the series presented a metatextual whodunit about a group of teenagers in the quiet California town of Woodsboro that are soon terrorized by a pop culture obsessed serial killer and an eerie ghost-faced mask. After one of the greatest cold openings in film history featuring Drew Barrymore, the film shifts focus to our main protagonist and the heart of the story, Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell. Sidney is a complex heroine who we find still struggling with the tragic murder of her mother the year prior. Surrounding Sidney is a unique social circle of friends, a sexually frustrated boyfriend played by Skeet Ulrich, a young inept cop named Dewey played by David Arquette, and a cutthroat news reporter Gail Weathers played by Courtney Cox, all of whom become entangled in the mystery killer's bloody rampage. After slicing and dicing his way through a few more victims and terrorizing Sidney, the Ghostface Killer makes his final attack at a climactic house party. When most of the party leaves to go check out the Fonz's corpse, the real fun begins as Sidney plays cat and mouse with the killer, not knowing who to trust until their identity is finally revealed to be Sidney's boyfriend, Billy Loomis. But Billy wasn't acting alone, as his friend Stu, played by an unhinged Matthew Lillard, is then soon revealed to be his partner. The duo reveal that not only have they been responsible for the recent killing spree, but that they were also the true killers behind the murder of Sidney's mother the previous year. Turns out Sidney's mother was having an affair with Billy's father and was responsible for his family falling apart. After laying out their plan in which they frame Sidney's father as the killer and stab each other a few times so they can come off as the sole survivors of the attack, Gail Weathers arrives to save the day. Kinda. She forgets to turn off the gun's safety and ends up getting knocked out, but does give Sidney enough time to escape, turn the tables on the killers, and call the police. In the end, Sidney manages to kill both Stu and Billy, as her and a handful of other survivors make it out of the house as the sun rises over the bloody scene. After a long and grueling production, the film's producers took a gamble by releasing the movie just before Christmas in 1996. While the opening box office was less than ideal, the film quickly began growing its audience as word of mouth spread, climbing the charts every weekend. Scream was a hit, and a new slasher franchise was born. Scream 2. With the immense success of the first movie, a sequel was quickly greenlit and put into production. Despite being held tightly under wraps, the original script for the film ended up being leaked in its entirety online, which resulted in frantic rewrites throughout the film's production and even more secrecy moving forward. The sequel finds Sidney now in college with fellow Woodsboro survivor Randy, a new boyfriend Derek, and a new group of friends as a new horror movie based on Sidney's life called Stab opens in theaters. When a couple is murdered at a special screening of the movie in which the entire audience is clad in ghost face masks and fake knives, Sidney, Randy, Gail, and Dewey are put on high alert as a new killer modeling themselves after Billy and Stu has seemingly arrived to town. Additionally, the man Sidney had formerly accused of being her mother's killer, Cotton Weary, has popped up as a fame-seeking obsessive trying to get Sidney to agree to an interview. The killer carves their way through the campus, picking off sorority girls, police officers, Sidney's new best friend Hallie, and even the fan favorite Randy, before finally confronting Sidney in dramatic fashion on the stage of the college's theater. The killer this time reveals himself to be Mickey, an unhinged student in Randy's film class who wants to get caught so he can seek celebrity status by blaming his killing spree on violence in movies when he goes to trial. Mickey toys with Sidney and claims her boyfriend Derek, who is tied up and hanging from a set piece above the stage, was his accomplice. But after some back and forth of messing with Sidney's head, Mickey ultimately shoots Derek before revealing the real second killer, Debbie Salt. Yes, the starstruck reporter who followed Gail around the entire movie joins the party and is revealed to actually be
Billy's mother.
Turns out Mrs. Loomis found Mickey online and used him to help carry out her revenge upon Sydney for killing her son, Billy. She promptly shoots her accomplice, who inadvertently shoots Gale, and it is soon another game of cat and mouse between Sydney and the killer. Just as Sydney seems to be bested, Cotton appears and gets into a standoff with Mrs. Loomis, who holds Sydney hostage. Sydney finally agrees to do an interview with Cotton, and he takes Mrs. Loomis out with a single shot. Gale emerges from the orchestra pit, still alive, and Mickey bursts back to life for one last scare before being gunned down once more. To close things out, Sydney, not wanting to take any chances, places a final round in Mrs. Loomis's head.
Just in case.
With solid scares, unexpected deaths, and an ending that built upon the lore of the original while setting the stage for things to come, the Scream franchise was poised for greatness. Scream 3. With Scream 2 being another hit at the box office, plans were quickly made to create a third entry in the series. However, series writer Kevin Williamson was at that point in very high demand and was not available to work on the film. He had written a thorough outline for the story, but ultimately producers at Dimension Films would turn the project over to new screenwriters who largely disregarded most of Williamson's work in favor of their own. To make matters worse, Neve Campbell's availability was more limited for the third film, and would result in her character's screen time being drastically reduced, with more of a focus being shifted to Dewey and Gale. Finally, one other major factor in the film's production was the real-world tragedy of the Columbine shooting, which made the filmmakers rethink the tone of the film and push for more comedy in favor of the series' more violent horror roots. The results are a sequel that feels like the black sheep of the franchise, but that's not to say it isn't without its charms. Scream 3 sees the core cast of survivors scattered to the wind as the story moves to Hollywood, where a third stab film is in production and a new killer is desperate to find Sidney Prescott. After killing off Cotton in the opening scene, a police detective, Mark Kincaid, played by Patrick Dempsey, reaches out to Gale for insight on the case, who then arrives in Hollywood, where we are introduced to the real star of the movie, those bangs. She reunites with Dewey, who is now working on the new Stab movie as a consultant and dating Gale's on-screen counterpart. After killing off a few more Stab cast members, the killer finally manages to track down Sydney, who is now living as a recluse in a secluded home in the country, where she works as a counselor for a women's crisis hotline. The killer gets through to Sydney on her home phone line, and she decides to join the rest of the group in Hollywood. The film reaches its climax at the home of Stab 3's director Roman, who is revealed to be the killer. It turns out Roman is actually Sydney's half-brother, who was abandoned by their mother after her time in Hollywood as an actress. Apparently, he tried to reunite with Maureen Prescott years earlier, but was rejected by her. This set off Roman to mastermind the murder of his mother by videotaping her affairs and showing them to Billy, setting into motion the events of the series. Sydney and her brother fight it out, and after Roman seemingly kills his sister with a gunshot to the chest, it is revealed that Sydney was wearing a bulletproof vest, and she stabs Roman. He pops up for the essential one last scare, but is ultimately taken out by Dewey with a bullet to the head. The film concludes on an uplifting note as Dewey and Gale get engaged, and a powerful moment as Sydney turns her back on an ominous open door, symbolizing her freedom from living in fear. All things considered, Scream 3 faced seemingly insurmountable odds during its production and still managed to deliver a satisfying conclusion to the original trilogy of films that stuck for over 10 years. Scream 4. With Wes Craven and original screenwriter Kevin Williamson agreeing to return, Scream 4 brought the franchise into a new era of horror. Set on the 15th anniversary of the Woodsboro murders, the film sees the original trio of Sydney, Dewey, and Gale return among a fresh cast of new teenagers, including Sydney's cousin, Jill, played by Emma Roberts. The film kicks off with an opener that picks fun at the recent trend of horror since the previous installment, as well as paints a humorous, almost alternate universe where the Scream franchise continued making sequels. When a new set of murders takes place, Dewey, now sheriff, investigates, which leads him to Sydney, who is in town promoting her new book. With evidence found in Sydney's rental car, she is officially considered a suspect and unable to leave Woodsboro. Gale is desperate to help out on the case after switching to a quiet life of writing fiction, but is shut down by Dewey. Sydney stays with her aunt and cousin as more teenagers begin getting picked off around the town. Eventually, things escalate to another house party where it is revealed that Sydney's cousin Jill and her boyfriend Charlie are the new ghost-faced killers. Essentially, Jill grew jealous living in the shadow of her famous cousin and wanted to steal the spotlight for herself by killing Sydney and becoming the new survivor of the family. Jill betrays her boyfriend and kills him before seemingly succeeding in her plans by stabbing Sydney and staging herself as a victim herself. However, things then take a turn when the true climax takes place at the hospital, where Jill learns that Sydney pulled through and is still alive. But of course, in the end, Sydney is able to best the killer with the help of Dewey and Gale, and the film ends with the press outside giving Jill the fame she was so desperately seeking. Probably the biggest issue with Scream 4 is that it doesn't know whether it wants to be the start of something new or a continuation of what came before. While many fans were happy to see the core cast remain center stage, it comes off almost at the detriment of the younger cast around them, as we end up with largely one-dimensional fodder for the killers. Still, the film was a welcome return to the franchise that seemed to poise Scream for a major return. Scream 2022. While Scream 4 was originally intended to launch a new trilogy of films, with poor box office performance along with the passing of series director Wes Craven in 2015, it looked like the Scream franchise was done for good. At least on the big screen. But if you're watching this video, you know that a brand new Scream is finally hitting theaters over a decade later. Now, normally I do a breakdown of what happens in the movie at this point, but I'm afraid that's simply against my religion. Really though, I have seen the new Scream, or Scream 5 for clarity's sake, and can say that it is probably my new favorite sequel of the franchise. And that's coming from someone who used to argue that Scream 2 was better than the original. The kills are absolutely brutal and make you feel every excruciating second in the best possible way. The new film also introduces a truly interesting story that knows how to use the legacy characters while still crafting a unique and dynamic cast of new characters as well. As much as I'd love to talk more specifics, I truly believe the marketing did such a good job at showing audiences just enough, and the best way to experience this movie is going in with as little knowledge as possible. All I will say is that the ending left me so excited for the future of this franchise in ways I never thought I would. Let's just hope we don't have to wait another decade before we get to return to Woodsboro again. And that's it for the Scream franchise. While it may not be as expansive as the other slasher franchises, it is truly the epitome of quality over quantity that has redefined the genre time and again. But tell us, what's your favorite Scream movie? Did you watch the Scream TV show? You should. What did you think of the new Scream? Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, keep it tuned to Nerdist.com.